Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. I'm so glad I found this article. I'm so excited to share it with you. And there is something that I've been waiting for some time. Remember the Ukrainians and the Russians at an early February and March 2022, they had some meetings to discuss, and maybe they find a way to stop the war, the continuation of whatever started in February 24th. Well, they had about 5 meetings until mid-February, when everything just stopped. And I wondered, when they met, the last time they met, these delegations of the Ukraine delegation and Russian delegation, they met in Istanbul the last time. And I didn't know they signed documents over there. I knew that they were exchanging, this is what I think, let's negotiate, what do you have, this is my offer, that's your offer, let me think about it, according to Vladimir Putin. Now, I understand, but I'm just reporting here what he says. He's coming with a piece of paper and says this is what was discussed at that meeting, and this is what the Ukrainians and the Russians agreed upon and did not agree on. And they signed those. Now, comes from Putin. You don't trust Putin, don't trust Putin. You trust Putin, you trust Putin. You're in the middle, just listen, and maybe we all learn out of this. So he's come with a piece of paper in front of the African delegation that visits, I think, I don't know if they're right now in Moscow or in St. Petersburg. I think they met in St. Petersburg, but location doesn't really matter. So this is coming from Russia Today. It is from June 17, 2023. Putin reveals details of draft treaty on Ukraine's neutrality. I said, oh my, and he has a piece of paper. I hope he's not like Chamberlain and landing in London, the piece of our time, remember, with Herr Hitler and so on. The Russian, after the Munich conference, the Russian president has shown the documents from the failed peace negotiations with Kiev. I was like, oh my god, this is gold mine here. Sorry to talk about gold, but that's what it is here. Moscow and Kiev agreed on the general terms of Ukraine's neutrality and security guarantees during the peace negotiations in March 2022. But Kiev then abruptly discarded the documents its delegation had already signed, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Saturday. Now, obviously, this is what he says. During a meeting with a group of African leaders in St. Petersburg, Putin showed for the first time the draft documents that were being discussed by the Russian and Ukrainian emissaries in Turkey more than a year ago. According to Putin, the document, titled The Treaty of the Permanent Neutrality and Security Guarantees for Ukraine, had been signed by the Ukrainian delegation. The draft stipulates that Ukraine must enshrine, and I'm quoting, permanent neutrality in its constitution. Russia, the US, Britain, China and France are listed as guarantors. So far, I don't see anything wrong here, but hey, move on. The addendum to the draft, also shown by Putin, outlines both Russian and Ukrainian proposals regarding the size of Ukraine's standing army during peacetime, like the Germans had after the First World War, as well as its equipment. Moscow proposed to cap the number of military personnel at 85,000 and the number of the National Guard members at 15,000. Kiev, meanwhile, proposed that its armed forces have up to 250,000 troops, so 85, 250, so 3 times more. Moscow suggested that Ukraine should be allowed to have 342 tanks, 1,029 armored vehicles, 96 multiple rocket launchers, 50 combat aircraft, and 52 auxiliary aircraft. Kiev, meanwhile, was in favor of having 800 tanks, 2,400 armored vehicles, 600 multiple rocket launchers, 74 combat aircraft, and 86 auxiliary aircraft. So 342 Russian tanks, they said, the Russians said 342, the other ones want 800. So it's almost 3 times. 1,029 armored vehicles, the other ones want 2,400, I'm sorry. That's a little bit more than double. The Russians said 96 multiple rocket launchers, the other ones said 600. Now that's a lot. And then 50 combat aircraft, 74 combat aircraft. Not a big difference. The sides also exchanged proposals on capping Ukraine's mortars, anti-tank weapons, and anti-air missile systems, among other equipment. The negotiations effectively broke down in the spring of 2022, shortly after Ukrainian officials accused Russian troops of killing civilians in several small cities around Kiev. Now, this is what the Russians say. The allegations were made immediately after Russian soldiers had withdrawn from the areas outside the Ukrainian capital in what the Kremlin described at the time as a, and I'm quoting, goodwill gesture. Moscow has since repeatedly denied committing atrocities in Ukraine. So, speaking on Saturday, Putin said that Ukraine was responsible for sabotaging the negotiations. And I'm quoting, after we pulled our troops away from Kiev as we had promised to do, the Kiev authorities had tossed their commitments into the dustbin of history, he said. They abandoned everything. And I'm quoting again Putin, where are the guarantees that they will not walk away from agreements in the future? Putin said. However, even under such circumstances, we have never refused to conduct negotiations. The problem is the four points are always there. So, nothing was mentioned by Putin that the United States put pressure on the Ukrainians or the Great Britain put pressure, nothing like that. They made others made this kind of accusations, but not Putin here. All he said is like, well, here it is, they agreed with this, we agree with this, we should have to discuss, continue the negotiations, and then we retreated, took our troops out of Kiev as a sign of a goodwill. However, they did it, and then they were accused of atrocities, and everything stopped. This is Vladimir Putin's version, and that's how much he's willing to disclose out of that draft treaty on Ukraine's neutrality. You take whatever you want out of that. You might argue from the very beginning, why should they be neutral in the first place? Well, sometimes, certain things are based on mutual understanding, based on each side's security. Obviously, Russia had its own security concerns, not with Ukraine per se, with NATO moving in. That was the whole thing, NATO moving in. And it seems like the other guy says, no, we have the right to do whatever we want. But imagine if not imagine, it's not hard to imagine that. If the roles would be reversed, how the Americans would react. We can only speculate, but I'm almost certain that if Russia will not collapse, we will be witnessing that. How? The first step, we already see it in Belarus, when the Russians brought already, according to Putin, weapons, nuclear weapons in Belarus right now, and they keep bringing them, and the other guys having an apoplectic shock or something. Because they do one thing that the other guy, which United States of America, did it in 5 countries, in 6 bases, brought nuclear weapons a long time ago, and are still there. So Russia said, you know what, we are equal or not? And the other guy says, no. Okay then, until we will be, and we gain your respect, somehow you're the teacher and we are the student, according to your vision, then we're going to have problems. And what they did? They broke the economic system, the military alliances, and the geopolitical balance. And the world order is up. The Russians just said yesterday, Lavrov said, we just not going to believe these guys again. even if they sign. That's bad. That means the rupture is so big that it's not going to be, you can't glue it back. Oh, this is per Putin, and I'm very glad that he came out with these numbers and his view on this. I'm waiting for the other side to come with their version. The same, I will have low expectations of trust as well. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.